Resistance and rebellion in Africa. They came with chains. They came with guns. They came with flags. But Africa rose. From kingdoms that refused to fall, to mothers who turned grief into fire, to warriors who faced bullets with bare hands. This is not a story of surrender. This is a story of revolt, a story of resistance carved into the soil, sung through generations, and etched in every scar of the continent. If you think Africa was conquered easily, think again. This is the untold story of Africa's rebellion. Throughout history, Africa has been portrayed as a continent that was conquered, as if her people simply bowed to chains and colonizers. But the truth is far more powerful. Africa has always resisted. From ancient kingdoms that stood tall against invaders to modern freedom fighters who faced tanks with slogans, Africa has never accepted domination without a fight. The resistance came in many forms. In the battlefield, in sacred rituals, in hidden songs, and even in silence. This is the story of that resistance, of the rebellions that erupted, the leaders who rose, and the spirit that refused to die. Early forms of resistance. Long before colonial borders were drawn, Africa was home to civilizations with their own systems of government, armies, and sovereignty, and they defended them fiercely. In the Kingdom of Kush, located in what is now Sudan, Queen Amenarrenas stood against the mighty Roman Empire around 25 BCE. After defeating their forces, she returned a bronze bust of Caesar Augustus, missing its head, as a warning. In the east, the Ethiopian Empire under Emperor Menelik II defeated Italy in the legendary Battle of Adwa, 1896. Ethiopia became a symbol of black pride and African defiance, the only African nation never formally colonized. In the south, the Zulu kingdom under Shaka Zulu revolutionized military warfare. Later, King Cetshwayo resisted British forces in the Anglo-Zulu War of 1879, even defeating them at the Battle of Isandlwana, one of the most shocking upsets in colonial military history. These weren't isolated cases. They were part of a larger pattern of African nations choosing to fight rather than surrender. Resistance to the slave trade. The transatlantic slave trade was one of the most brutal chapters in human history, but it was also met with deep and determined resistance, both in Africa and across the Atlantic. In present-day Angola, Queen Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba resisted the Portuguese for over 3 decades. She outmaneuvered them in politics and war, forging shifting alliances to protect her people. In one infamous moment, she used a servant's back as a human chair to avoid bowing before the Portuguese. Across the continent, local communities defended their villages from slave raids, built fortifications, and fought back against foreign intrusion. Enslaved Africans didn't go quietly. They rebelled on slave ships. Some took control of vessels. Others, once in the Americas, formed maroon societies, communities of escaped slaves. In Jamaica, Nanny of the Maroons led relentless guerrilla warfare against the British. And in Haiti, formerly enslaved Africans led by Toussaint Louverture and Jean-Jacques Dessalines sparked the only successful slave revolt in history, founding the world's first black republic in 1804. Resistance was everywhere, in strategy, spirit, and sacrifice. Resistance to colonization, 1880 to 1914. The scramble for Africa saw European powers divide the continent with no regard for its people. But on the ground, the people fought back. In West Africa, Samurai Touré built the Wassoulou Empire, mobilized thousands, and fought the French for over 15 years. He moved his capital repeatedly, using guerrilla warfare and diplomacy until he was captured in 1898. In German East Africa, now Tanzania, the Maji Maji Rebellion, 1905 to 1907, united over 20 ethnic groups. The people believed sacred water, Maji, would turn bullets to water, a tragic symbol of hope in the face of firepower. In the Ashanti Empire, when the British demanded the golden stool, the spiritual symbol of the Ashanti nation, Ya Asantewa, a queen mother, declared, "If the men won't fight, then we, the women, will. We will fight the white man." She led a powerful revolt against British rule in 1900. These were not primitive reactions. They were coordinated movements rooted in identity, pride, and the will to live free. Cultural, religious, and spiritual resistance. Not all resistance involved weapons. Some of Africa's most powerful rebellions were fought through faith, language, and culture. In Sudan, Muhammad Ahmad, known as the Mahdi, led a spiritual revolution against Ottoman, Egyptian, and British rule. His movement created a theocratic state that lasted nearly 2 decades. In the Belgian Congo, Simon Kimbanga founded a spiritual movement based on Christian beliefs and African identity. He was arrested for preaching that God would deliver Africans from European rule and was imprisoned for 30 years. Across the continent, colonizers banned indigenous religions, forced new names, and tried to erase languages. But people resisted by secretly practicing traditional rituals, preserving oral histories, and passing on songs and stories that held their truth. Culture itself became a weapon, one that no empire could fully suppress. Liberation movements, 1940s to 1970s. By the mid-20th century, Africa's resistance matured into organized liberation movements. World War II weakened European empires, and Africans demanded freedom. In Kenya, the Mau Mau Rebellion, 1952 to 1960, targeted colonial authorities and landowners. Though the British responded with brutal crackdowns, the rebellion laid the groundwork for Kenya's independence in 1963. In Algeria, the National Liberation Front, FLN, launched an 8-year war against French colonial rule. It ended in victory, but at a cost of over 1 million lives. Ghana, led by Kwame Nkrumah, used civil disobedience, strikes, and mass organization to win independence in 1957, the first sub-Saharan African country to do so. Elsewhere, Mozambique, Angola, Guinea-Bissau, Zimbabwe, Namibia. Armed struggle was the path. Guerrilla fighters trained for years to challenge powerful colonial armies. Voices like Patrice Lumumba, Amilcar Cabral, Steve Biko, and Thomas Sankara reminded the world that Africa was no longer begging for freedom, it was demanding it. The legacy of resistance. Africa's resistance didn't end with independence. Today it lives on, in protests, in policy, in art, in memory. Pan-Africanism continues to shape continental unity. Modern movements, from NSARS in Nigeria to protests in Sudan and South Africa, echo the same demand: justice, dignity, and true sovereignty. Schools now teach the stories of local heroes once labeled rebels. Across capitals, streets are renamed after freedom fighters. Statues rise where they once were silenced. Resistance is no longer just history, it's identity. Africa fought, and still fights. Freedom was not a gift handed to Africa. It was seized, it was earned, it was bled for. From ancient battlefields to modern ballot boxes, Africa has never stopped resisting. This is not a history of defeat. It is a record of courage, a legacy written by queens and kings, by farmers and students, by warriors and dreamers. It is the heartbeat of a continent that refuses to be conquered. Africa was never silent. Africa never surrendered. Africa fought and still fights. This continent is not defined by what was done to it, but by how it rose against it. From the battle cries of warriors in the savannah, to the secret prayers of freedom fighters in prison cells, to the songs of unity echoing through modern streets, resistance is woven into Africa's soul. Every rebellion, every stand, every act of defiance was a declaration. We are not slaves. We are not subjects. We are sovereign. And though the weapons may have changed, from spears to slogans, from battlefields to ballots, the struggle continues against exploitation, against corruption, against the ghosts of colonialism still lingering in shadows. So to understand Africa is to understand its will to fight. To know Africa is to know its courage. This is not just history, it is identity. It is the story of a continent that refused to be conquered and never will be.